founds the Miss magazine and publishes its first issue. The magazine becomes the major forum for women's voices and serves as an icon of the modern feminist movement. That same year, Gloria Steinem and other prominent women figures found the National Women's Political Caucus, a nationwide, multi-partisan, and grassroots organization established for three bottom-line issues: reproductive freedom, affordable child care, and passage of the Equal Rights Amendment. In 1972, the U.S. government passes Title IX of the Education Amendments and bans sex discrimination in schools. As a result, the enrollment of women in athletics programs and professional schools increases dramatically. In 1972, one more push to the Equal Rights Amendment goes into effect when a proposed amendment to the United States Constitution is introduced intended to guarantee equal rights under the law for Americans, regardless of sex, stating specifically, equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. After an 8-year extension on the ratification, a total of 35 of the required 38 states had ratified the proposed amendment, failing to pass the Equal Rights Amendment into U.S. federal law. After the ordeal, one feminist proposed, "If the ERA does not pass now, we won't see it again, perhaps in this century." Sadly, she was right. In 1973, as a result of the landmark Roe v. Wade case, the Supreme Court establishes a woman's right to safe and legal abortion, overriding the anti-abortion laws of many states. The abortion issue, vital to the preservation of women's equality, personal freedom, and privacy, erupts. In 1976, marital rape is made illegal for a husband to rape his wife. The first known Take Back the Night March, an internationally held march and rally intended as a protest and direct action against rape and other forms of violence against women, originated by the radical feminist movement in the United States, is organized in San Francisco, California on November 4th, 1978. To this day, the Take Back the Night theme is still a poignant rally and march for all feminist and women activists across international borders worldwide. In 1985, Emily's Early Money is Like Yeast list, a political action committee in the United States that aims to help elect pro-choice, democratic women to office, is founded by Ellen Malcolm. Since its founding, the organization has helped elect 61 pro-choice Democratic women members of Congress, 11 senators, 8 governors, and 216 women to state and local office. Just exactly when does the second wave of feminism come to a close is not clearly defined, and to this day debated among circles of feminist theorists. However, in the late 70s and early 80s, a definite shift in the women's liberation movement indeed takes place.
That man over there says that women need to be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches and to have the best place everywhere. Nobody ever helps me into carriages or over mud puddles or gives me any best place. And ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arm. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could head me. And ain't I a woman? I could work as much and eat as much as a man when I could get it, and bear the lash as well. And ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children and seen most all sold off to slavery. And when I cried out with a mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me. And ain't I a woman? Sojourner Truth, 1851. Black feminism, or what Alice Walker later defines as womanism, begins its insurgency during the early to mid-1980s. Barbara Smith, perhaps the first of many lines of African American women to play a significant role in building and sustaining black feminism in the United States, starts a movement within a movement. Later, the vociferous Bell Hooks takes the podium with her 1981 published book, Ain't I a Woman? Black Women and Feminism, where she examines the effect of racism and sexism on black women, the civil rights movement, and feminist movements from suffrage to the 70s. In it, Bell Hooks argues that the convergence of sexism and racism during slavery contributed to the black women having the lowest status and worst conditions of any group in American society. Meanwhile, she says the feminist movement, a largely white middle and upper class affair, did not articulate the needs of poor and non-white women, thus reinforcing sexism, racism, and classism. She suggests this explains the low numbers of black women who participated in the feminist movement in the 1970s after their battle with civil rights in the 1960s. In 1991, Anita Hill accused Clarence Thomas, an African-American man nominated to the Supreme Court, of sexual harassment that had allegedly occurred a decade earlier while Hill worked as his assistant in the U.S. Department of Education. Thomas denied the accusations, and after extensive debate, the Senate voted 52-48 in favor of Thomas. Hill and Thomas's case brought attention to the ongoing presence of sexual harassment in the workplace. In response to the Thomas hearings, Rebecca Walker published an article titled "Becoming the Third Wave" in a 1992 issue of Ms., in which she declared, "I am not a post-feminism feminist. I am the third wave." This event is often marked as the beginning of the usage of the term third wave as applied to feminist history.
When it was just poor women who were being concerned, nobody was listening at all, right? And it definitely didn't make academic status at that point. When upper class white women started getting involved, then it got more attention, so to speak, right? It raised people's consciousness about this particular phenomenon. Okay, now, people who are in a position of suffering often like to claim them, and this is a psychological issue. It would take a long time. I can support this, but it would take a very long time. So I'll just say it this way. There tends to be the idea that you want to be the worst sufferer for some reason. And if people are suffering worse than you, it seems to negate your own suffering.
One of the things when you look back to the history of black women in America that's so intriguing, black women were feminists before the word feminism even came to light. You know, you look at Harriet Tubman and her leadership during the Underground Railroad and that whole experience. She led whole communities of folk out of slavery, you know, and risked her life to ensure that black families and black women and black men were able to come together as communities before it was a white upper middle class experience. Black women were feminists long before the word actually became in vogue.
We've always been feminist. We just didn't call it that, but we've always been feminist. Every woman I know in my family has been able to, has worked, done whatever they needed to do, and they did not necessarily fit into those traditional roles. They bought property by themselves, they raised children by themselves, you know, some of the women. So it was never called anything other than just being a woman, basically. I think that African American women, just what she says, we just do what we have to do to survive. And I think that's kind of the way it's been for us.
I was thinking about this, and I never paid any attention to the feminist movement because it didn't have anything to do with me. You know, like she said, I grew up with strong women. You took care of your household, you worked, you handled your business. It had nothing to do with me. And so maybe there will come a time when there won't even be a need for that term. That young girls will grow up knowing that to be a woman is to be an adult, and that adults take care of themselves, and adults pursue their dreams, and they get careers, and they buy homes and cars, and they raise children.
What started happening was minority women started being used as case commentary for upper class white women. Say, see, look at what's happening to these other women, without letting them actually into the ranks. They were using them in conversation, saying this is how bad women have it, talking about the spectrum of women without really addressing the needs of that spectrum. So in the second wave, you do have this problem. Third wave, you have somewhat of a reconciliation, okay? And you have, you know, womanism being brought back into the fold of feminism. And then you have, you know, people, and you have, you know, folks now talking about black feminists. Barbara was one of them that you talked about. But they recognize themselves as feminists proper still under the overall umbrella.
When I think of feminism, I think of spoiled white women who've had their husbands provide for them, and now they want to get out there and do something for themselves. And none of the women I knew had it like that. What were they being liberated from? You know, they were.
That's true. There was nothing to be liberated from.
No.
With the different issues that have come about, with the different things that have evolved, that it has become necessary for us to go more into this and deal more with it. There are some people who are all on one side, some who are all on the other side. You know, as you say, they're the gays, they're the lesbians, and they're all of the movements that are coming forward. And all of it has to do with discrimination. You know, some people are being discriminated against because of race, color, creed, and various other things.
I've heard that, like, in the first marches, like, African American women were always made to march in the back of the line. And I think that was definitely societal, just because of the time, you know. I think that, but I think it was wrong. I mean, all of the racism, you know, it was all wrong, and they should have been, you know, unified from the start, because, you know, there's strength in numbers, you know, if nothing else, and they're not any different. They're all women, and they're all fighting for the same thing, you know.
I mean, how dare you call yourself like a women's activist if you're only like a white woman activist?
Yeah.
I mean, that's
if you
bullshit.
believe in equalism between the sexes, but not equalism between the races.
But then there are, like, there's the reverse. There's civil rights leaders who believe that, you know, he didn't include women in their revolution, and that was a mistake.
That's a good point.
It was, yeah.
Because now look at black women now. They're some of the most subjugated women people.
There were some really amazing articles I remember reading when I was like 16, by some girls in what's her name? I think it was Gloria. She an African American girl, and she remembers growing up, like, her mom telling her that, you know, feminism was like a white woman's thing, you know, and that, like, just kind of she was you know, she was a black girl and she was supposed to just hang out with black girls, and like she could, you know, fight for rights or whatever, but the whole movement was like a white girl's thing, and
Like, she had to stay segregated, pretty much.
I think that an institution that's racist will probably also be sexist. I think that the mindset, whether it's individuals or corporations, if you have a mindset that says, whether it's conscious or subconscious, that some people are better than others or more qualified or more intelligent based on an abstract concept. You know, that concept, I believe, it can move around. So it can be based on race or based on sex or age or you name it.
Show me what a feminist looks like. This is what a feminist looks like. Show me what a feminist looks like. This is what a feminist looks like.
Third wave of feminism really had its roots in the mid-1980s, but began to emerge onto the scene in the early 1990s. Today's third wave of feminism is a very complex notion. Third wave feminism is a term identified with several diverse strands of feminist activity and study. The movement arose as a response to perceived failures of second wave feminism. It was also a response to the backlash against initiatives and movements created by the second wave. The third wave theory usually encompasses queer theory, colored women consciousness, womanism, post-colonial theory, post-feminism, critical theory, transnationalism, and ecofeminism. Many issues in feminism are raised, like racism, lesbianism, transgender and transsexual orientations, classism, radical feminist, and a host of other interpretive definitions.
In the late 70s, politics in Britain became more extreme. As the state moved dramatically to the right, the left began to fragment. The women's movement was already an established political force, but now a group of women splintered away from the mainstream of feminist thinking. They called themselves the Revolutionary Feminists. Unlike the socialists, who pictured a revolution where the ruling class and the working class would be on opposite sides of the barricades, revolutionary feminists declared war on men.
Third wave feminists focused more elaborately on identity politics as they challenged the second wave's paradigm as to what is or is not good for females. This period perhaps was the time that feminism not only broke off into conflicting domains, but had its deepest and divisive role as being stigmatized within society. For many, The rallying for the youth to engage in feminism is the emphasis that has struck within the third wave. The fundamental right